Space, the final frontier. This is the Observers Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. Its mission to explore the solar system, to seek out new observations and data, to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. And now the host of the Observers Notebook, Tim Robertson.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. Each episode, we share discoveries, observing techniques, and stories from the people who explore the moon, planets, comets, and beyond. Whether you're looking through a backyard telescope or a leading professional researcher, we're all united under one sky. I'm Tim Robertson, your host, and thank you for being there. Now, if you listen to the podcast in your car or your phone, did you know you can now watch it? That's right, the Observer's Notebook is now available in video right here on the ALPO YouTube channel. And here's something interesting. Over 50% of the people watching or listening are not subscribed. So take a quick second, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell so you never miss another episode. It's free, and it really helps grow our channel. This show is made possible by support from you, our listeners. If you'd like to help the Observer's Notebook keep going, check out our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/observersnotebook. For just $1 a month, you're supporting the show. For $5, you get early access to the podcast. For $10, you receive a copy of the Novice Observer's Handbook. And for $35 a month, you'll be listed as a producer of the podcast. And also, you can find out more about the ALPO by going to www.alpo-astronomy.org, and where you can join for as little as $22 a year. And now, let's get started with episode 230 of the Observer's Notebook podcast. Enjoy. All right, one of the great joys of amateur astronomy is that we just don't observe the night sky. We share it through star parties, clubs, books, magazines, conversations that stretch late into the night. It's always a community effort. Today's guest is someone who has helped shape that shared experience for generations of skywatchers. For decades, he's been the editorial helm of Astronomy Magazine, guiding discoveries, missions, and the passion for amateur astronomers communicated to the world. Beyond his role as editor, he's a writer, historian of astronomy, someone who deeply understands both the science and the human stories behind it. And chances are, if you've been in his hobby any length of time, his work has influenced you, how you learned, observed, and thought about the night sky. Today, we're going to talk about where amateur astronomy has been, where it's going, and what still excites us when we look up today. It's a real pleasure to welcome David Eicher to the Observer's Notebook podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Tim. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, good. We've shared the stage on Scott Roberts' global star parties that he does a few times.
Yeah, that's great fun, isn't it?
It is. He's got a good thing going there, and I've been wanting to get you on the podcast for a while, so I finally able to coerce you to come on. That's good.
Anytime. I sure appreciate the interest, and it's great to talk to you again.
Yeah. So I want to start way back. What was the first moment you remember looking up and realizing the sky had grabbed onto you?
Boy, that was back in the Middle Ages almost. So I was a teenager. I was, I think, 14 or 15 years old, and I went to a star party. This was in a little college town called Oxford, Ohio, where Miami University is. That's where my father was a professor of chemistry. We had a little astronomy club in that town, believe it or not, small town, relatively. And I went and to this party, went out into the backyard in a suburban neighborhood, looked in a little, I think it was an Edmund, either a 4 1/4 or a 6-inch Newtonian,
Okay.
saw Saturn for the first time. And I was completely blown away that you could walk right out, look into the universe, and have exceptional view of Saturn with its orangey globe and rings, and I was immediately thunderstruck, and I had to get into astronomy.
So at that point, were you then an astronomy kid?
I was an astronomy kid. I was thinking maybe I would do certainly something in the sciences. Maybe I'd be a doctor. I didn't want to do exactly what my dad did,
Hmm.
even though I kind of grew up around a chem lab at Miami there.
Okay.
But immediately this was attractive, and I instantly wanted to get into astronomy and started observing. I think some of those most fun times back then were just observing the whole sky with binoculars,
Hmm.
not knowing exactly what to expect. That was kind of fun.
That's true. You mentioned binoculars. What about your first telescope? What was that?
So I got a for I think it was my a birthday later in that same year of 1976, got a Celestron 8. So I
Oh my.
immediately went out and set it up and looked at everything. And it was kind of a revelation because I loved looking at planets. I loved looking at deep sky objects. And the local newsletter, believe it or not, they printed a newsletter for this little astronomy club. They had a guy who was writing about deep sky observing who had quit. So what did they do but get the kid who didn't know anything about anything to succeed him? So that started me writing about
Oh
deep.
my.
And one of the first couple nights I had this C8 out. We lived in a neighborhood that was adjacent to all sorts of farmland, reasonably dark
Okay.
for, compared to what it is now and a normal kind of suburban life. And so I immediately went out in the late in the at night in the early morning, and saw the Veil Nebula. And I read in books you're not supposed to be able to see that with an alien scope. So that immediately got me motivated, and I started writing about deep sky objects.
Oh.
That led me to start a little publication that was called Deep Sky Monthly at the time, and that led to Astronomy Magazine.
Now, were you a writer before this?
No, I was completely, learned as an amateur, if you will, and
Wow.
frankly, with writing, as with lots of other things, the way you get good, I think, is really just doing a lot of it all the
Mhm.
time, and that really polishes you. So no, I started as a rank amateur writer.
Okay. Now, you were editor for Astronomy Magazine for years. Now you're editor emeritus?
So I'm editor emeritus, which is kind of like being minister without portfolio. It means you have input on a few things, but you
Okay.
have zero responsibilities at all. So this is not bad, as an arrangement. So I'll probably be writing some books now in the
Oh,
future, and am involved in a couple of other different things I'll mention here in a little while, if I can.
yeah.
Also, but still writing for Astronomy Magazine, but not, you know, working daily on it. So it's a nice bit of a break from that. I was at the magazine for 43 years
Wow.
continuously, and I was the editor in chief for 23 years. So, that's 43 years. It's a long time,
That's
certainly
that's
good.
like I've had Diana from Sky Telescope on as
Yeah,
well, and we talked about the
exactly.
number of editors that they've had. And it's just like
Yeah.
maybe less than five in all the years. It's just crazy.
Right. And I knew, I when I was a teenager, first going to Stellafane, and I got to know, Dennis Chichico and Norm
Mm,
Sperling, who were then at S&T, and they marched me right in, and I sat down and talked to Joe Ashbrook, who was the editor then. And, that was back in the day on Bay State Road. But
mm,
all those editorial groups were in great
right.
shape, and we've always been really good friends. Diana's a great pal now, so
She's incredible.
she's a wonderful
Yeah.
editor, writer, and enthusiast with astronomy. So there's always been a bit of a joke about the competition. Well, they're really different magazines.
Yeah, they
We've
are.
always been pals for the most part. Yeah.
Great. So before you were the editor, did you ever think about how astronomy should be communicated?
I did, and I did tried to do a lot of that as an amateur early on with Deep Sky. Then I was the most junior guy when I went to Astronomy Magazine. That was when
Mm,
Richard Derry and Robert Burnham were there for some years still, and they were, running the show. And so they basically taught me everything that I knew about it. And, this was a sort of a golden age of amateur astronomy. The Dobsonian revolution had
Right.
coincided with that era with Deep Sky magazine. Richard Berry had Telescope Making magazine, also writing a lot about the how to make your own telescopes with large mirrors and see a lot more. And there was an explosion of information about objects, which now we kind of take for granted. But, we didn't know a lot of the good data about all these deep sky objects. That kind of revolution happened along with the telescope revolution as
Mhm.
well, a kind of an information revolution, if you will. And so, and in the planetary world, there's been an explosion of discovery. Think of all the planetary
Oh yeah.
satellites we didn't know about, until recently. So all of that really accelerated amateur astronomy in a big, big way over the last generation.
That's very true. Very true. When you took over Astronomy Magazine, what did you want the readers to feel when they opened up an issue?
It was a pretty easy job, to be absolutely honest, because I had been there for quite a number of years and I knew the formula well. And it's kind of about, it reminds me there's an old song by the rock band called the Kinks called Give the People What They Want. And when you know what the readers want and the various areas to hit along the way and to pay attention to in a given period, some of them every month, some of them every couple of months, and so on. It was a pretty easy readership to make happy because of all the experience that the folks at Astronomy had with that.
Yeah, Astronomy Magazine's always had a really good balance too between beginning articles and more advanced articles as well. Was that difficult to balance that out to make sure every issue had that type of thing?
Once you really understood it was a pretty straightforward formula. And of course, S&T has always been a little more advanced, a little
Hmm.
more technical.
Hmm.
So the two cover the field very well, the two publications. But, with writing a lot about planetary events, good oppositions, good, conjunctions involving planets, with writing about deep sky objects, mostly by constellations, with writing about what's up in the night sky. And, we've been in a complete embarrassment of riches with science results over the last, 20 to 30 years.
Hmm.
So the frustration really was there aren't enough pages to fit everything you'd like to write about in. It was kind of that was really the frustration of designing issues. We really should be doing this, and this, and we have to leave three things out until next month, kind of a thing, which is a nice problem to have.
It is. It is. You focus on the time sensitive stuff, but with a magazine, time sensitive is difficult as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But it's a great period. I think in the last, 50 years, we've learned as much as we had known about the universe in the 500 years preceding that. So this is a good time to be into astronomy.
Oh, it is. But you mentioned earlier the golden age. I imagine
Yes.
you were talking the Dobson age and things like that,
Yeah.
where everybody's
Yeah.
building their own telescopes, which doesn't happen anymore.
No.
So when you look back, what do you think was the most transformative for amateur astronomy? What period of time?
I think that, the 70s into the end of the 80s were really a revolutionary period because by complete coincidence, we had an explosion of interest in astronomy. Some of that is driven by comets. A bright comet will get more people into the hobby,
Hmm.
not, go out and see Comet Vest or Hale Bopp or Yakataki, but really in there for a while. I
Hmm.
can't believe this. I got to get into this. I got to learn about it. And we that sort of thing coincided with this information revolution. Nothing against one of my old favorite inspirations, but Burnham's Celestial Handbook, a great biblical reference for a
Yep.
lot of astronomy enthusiasts. That has basic data on a lot of objects, photometry, and so on, going back to the 1930s. Okay, so a lot of the data that we had back then was woefully out of date.
Right.
And so in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, we had an information revolution going on. And then as we talked about already, the John Dobson and showing people, the night sky through large thin mirrors, the technology revolution really took off in the 70s. And that was what Richard and telescope making were working on. And, things had relatively been stagnant and had to put your own telescope together since the early days of, Albert Ingalls, a Scientific American. That revolution happened to take place really in the end of the 60s, 70s, and 80s also. So all that stuff kind of came by in that same era of 15 or 20 years and accelerated amateur astronomy in a big, big way, largely coincidentally.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you put a tent pole in with comets. That comets seemed,
Yeah,
because I remember back in '86 with Halley's Comet. I mean,
yeah,
Celestron and me, they all sold more telescopes than they ever had in their life. I
yeah.
remember going to Riverside Telescope Makers Conference like 2 years later, and everyone was selling those telescopes that they bought at great deals at
Absolutely.
our
The,
TMC. It
the
was crazy.
comet telescopes.
The
Yes,
comet
indeed.
telescope,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly right. So that's interesting. Now, with the way we're going now, technology is advancing so fast in the hobby. Yeah, it's changed how people experience the night sky, don't you think?
It really is. And we've got things kind of pushing and pulling in different directions now. If I fly back home to Milwaukee, now I'm in the Wild West out here. It only took me 43 years to get to a really dark sky. But, if you fly back to Wisconsin, where I was for many years, you see enormously illuminated cities all over the American landscape. There's not really a good reason for sending photons to try to illuminate the rest of the solar system. So we've got that as a major challenge, light
Mhm.
pollution still. It's harder for people now to get a night sky and
True.
be aware of looking up. And this is a revelation to a lot of people who live in cities to go to a star party. We have them down here in New Mexico, or down the club in Tucson has a big observatory down here. And it's
Hmm.
stunning to most people, that, as it was when I was 14 years old, that you can go out and look at this stuff and the universe is all out there, because there's so much light pollution, especially where a lot of people have to live for their careers now in the city. Now, on the other end of that, so we've got a challenge with astronomy,
Hmm.
but on the other end of that, pulling, that is not easier. It's more difficult than it ever has been with light pollution
Hmm.
now. However, with imaging, at least, if not viewing, a lot of these smart telescopes now, it's so much easier now to do astro imaging, either of planets at high resolution, high image scales, if you will, or longer exposure, deep sky imaging. Back when I was first getting interested in astronomy, and I did some astro imaging, and then after a few months, I went out, and Ben Mayer and John Sanford and all these guys were sending me the best photos that existed to go into Deep Sky Monthly. So I thought, boy, what am I going to do as an astro imager? Give up, these great images that are much better than what I can do are coming in. But in those days, it used to be like being in a prison camp. You'd have to sit there and guide on an illuminated
Oh
red
yeah.
eyepiece for 45 minutes or an hour. Now these smart telescopes, you can do imaging, in a few minutes of faint objects, and essentially subtract a lot of that light
Hmm.
pollution out of the image. So there's quite an imaging revolution going on right now in the
Yeah,
last years, which is helping the hobby a lot, I think.
our local club, we had astrophotographers like Tony Alice and Bob
Yeah,
Farah as members.
yeah, yeah,
And I'd be with them. I go, so what are you gonna do tonight? Oh, I'm gonna image this galaxy. And they would have to guide on film for
yes,
hours. And I'm like,
yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah.
that doesn't sound like much fun to me at all. I'm a visual guy. That's why I want to look through the telescope and see the object. That doesn't seem like fun. But now, like you mentioned, the smart telescopes, where automated imaging is now happening. When you
It's
first
making,
when you
yeah.
first saw us going toward that way, were you excited or concerned?
I was excited, and I never felt like I was in that group of imagers or competitive about it or anything. And
Right.
I think it's really spreading. Now you have people sending you images, and they're fantastic images of really faint nebulae, galaxies, and high resolution planetary stuff. And I've never heard of these people.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting that you can get into. You don't have to have this slavish, 6 month, trial period of really learning to be an expert. You can get in there and do really nice imaging, whether it be planets or deep sky objects, pretty quickly now. So I think this is fantastic
Yeah,
for the
you
future of the hobby.
yeah, you talk to people that are in the hobby now, you say star hopping, glaze look, clock drive, setting circles. What are those things? And
Now,
that
some
was our
people,
world when we got into this.
that's right. And even many years ago, I had, set one of the 17.5 inch Coulter Dobsonians for a long while. And I used to love to star hop. And back when I had a better brain, I knew all the patterns of how to just star hop to all these deep sky objects, dozens and dozens and many, many, many of them. So I had as a kind of a joke, but it worked. I had a 6 by 30 finder on this 17.5 inch Dob, that was as big as a car, and, it worked. But,
Yeah,
now, of course, you'd be crazy. Now everything is, digital setting circles, and you can punch it in, and that's much easier too.
it is much easier.
But I just hope it doesn't go so far like some professional astronomers. You're in a dome at a big observatory, and you go outside, and they're taking a break, and well, boy, Corvus looks really nice. And they say, well, where's Corvus? And there's some of the leading
Yes,
astrophysicists,
yes,
come on, guys,
yeah,
so I think not knowing the sky can go too far.
that's true. That's true. Yeah, that's true. Now you've lived through the cutting edge of the shift from print media to digital.
Yes.
What during that phase or transition surprised you?
Well, there are real challenges going on now, in fact, for both magazines and for print in all sorts of ways. Because, I'm a print guy, and I even will buy books now and stuff, and people think I'm nuts, but that's just the way I am, but now there are serious challenges because the people who get the print magazines, Astronomy and Sky and Tell, they want that print magazine. But everyone who is, probably, 40 or younger reads everything here now.
Yep.
And so it's a real challenge for both, and for all hobby, for all
Yeah.
activities, not just astronomy, to serve the people who want the print and put a lot of stuff online. Astronomy's content is freely on the website,
Mhm.
astronomy.com, and have the whole equation work out financially still. So this is a challenge for the future, and nobody, I think, knows exactly where this is going to go. Still making the print people happy, but increasingly serving a digital audience where a lot of your coin that comes in is more from advertising. So it's
That's
a real challenge for the future. And, it was, I think in 1970, in the New Yorker, they proclaimed the death of the book. It hasn't happened yet. You still can't really take a laptop to the beach and safely read stuff. But it's becoming a lot more challenging now. For print, and we'll see where it goes. It's going to be a challenge in the next decade or two, I think.
Yeah, we're struggling with that in the Alpo right now because we have a print journal.
Yes,
We
the
also do the PDF version for members,
Sterling astronomer.
and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
people over 55 want the print journal, and the
Right.
younger ones want the digital. Well,
Yeah.
the cost for printing this magazine is getting to be outrageous.
Right.
And
Right.
we're trying to not, you know, keep upping our membership just to pay for the journal.
Sure.
But it's a tough thing right now. It really is. I personally prefer reading our magazine on the computer. I don't read it on the
Yeah.
phone. That's just too small for me. But
Yeah.
but it's yeah, it's a tough thing we're going through right now in all media like that too.
That's right. It's a real challenge, and there are as yet, I think, no easy answers to this either. So it's, we're all in an ongoing experiment, I think, here, and exactly how this pans out, we don't know. Also, it's a bit of a challenge. A lot of the younger people are just sampling stuff on social media, and they don't get engaged so
Hmm.
much with things. So that's a bit of a challenge too.
Yeah, that's true. Now, what do you think print media does better than social media or YouTube?
Well, it does some things worse because obviously social media and YouTube, moving pictures in some ways are more powerful than print, regardless of how the print is delivered. But also, I'm the kind of a guy, I've written a lot of books and I've
Hmm.
been involved in, uh, what most people would think is, insanely deep research on not only astronomy stuff, but historical stuff as
Hmm.
well. There, I think, to really get into a subject very deeply, you have to study things and not just see them and then they go away, kind of a thing. And I'm not trying to judge anyone in any way, but I think having the books and the materials in front of you in a prolonged way, that's how people who create things kind of work with stuff, and people say, well, everything's online. And, those people have never spent, a couple of weeks with me at the Library of Congress, where there are 30 million books, but, 95% of which are not available unless you go and pull a book off the shelf. So I think there's a little bit of people getting ahead of themselves, that all the good information that exists in the universe is online. That's not true, if you really get deeply into
That's
subject,
true. That's true.
so that's a bit of a concern for the future. Yet there are some things that computers, that digital media, that so on, showing us moving images, showing us videos and so on, that print can't do. So I think you need them. I would take the easy way out and say you need them both.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
That may be a cowardly thing to say.
No, it's honest though. It's honest. So you spent a lot of time with astronomy history and preserving astronomy history.
Yeah.
Why is that so important to you?
When I was young at the magazine, I had, it was a happenstance thing, and I don't want to devolve this into a Civil War discussion, but I got given a lot of materials, and from a great great grandfather who fought for Ulysses Grant and William Tecumseh Sherman in the Civil War,
Okay.
artifacts, books, photographs, things like that, and at that point, I had excess energy. I was wanted to write about things, get into projects after being at the magazine all day. And I thought, geez, I've written about astronomy all day here. I don't want to go home on the weekends and write about more astronomy when I was in my 20s. So that appealed to me as a different thing to get into. And then that historical look, when we look out into the universe, we're of course looking back in time. We're thinking about the future of the cosmos and so on as well. And, the history is, looking back in time in a different way with humans here. I actually brought a few artifacts. I thought if we run out of things to do, I could show some of these.
Sure.
And I don't know if you want me to do it now, or I don't want to hijack the discussion.
No, we're this free flowing. If you feel it's a
Okay.
good time to do it now, we can do it now.
Okay, but it's always fascinated me because there are artifacts floating around still, and I found a few that relate to astronomy. So this is Worcester's pronouncing spelling book, and this is from 1865, and this was at a Boston book dealer's inventory that I stumbled into, and I don't know if you can see this signature here, but it's Percival Lowell's
Oh
child
my.
spelling book.
Oh my.
So that's his signature as a child. His his Elizabeth, his sister, also signed it as Bessie here, so she had it as well. And so when you can find still artifacts that connect us to some of these great folks of the past. There's a section in here, believe it or not, on astronomical signs. There are notations all through it. So it's possible that when he was a child, these are the first pages that Lowell was reading about constellations. We'll
Huh.
never know. And then of course, Lowell's books. I have some of these out, by the way. I have to make a confession because we're having an event in a couple of weeks in Flagstaff at
Okay.
Lowell. But Lowell's book on Mars here, which he wrote a number of books on
Right.
Mars. This is the first one. So these are things that I think it's important to be connected where we came from to understand kind of where we're going. Then just to complete the business about Lowell here, forgive me, but I dug this out as well. We were at the Texas Star Party, a number of us, friends of mine, Brian Skiff and David Levy and others
Mhm.
back in the day. This was in the 1980s. And one of the years Clyde Tombaugh was with us, who discovered Pluto back in 1930. I'm not that old. This was not 1930, but this was in the 1980s. He was there at the Texas Star Party with us. I couldn't find my sketchbook because this was the era when we first had big Dobsonians. We were observing with a 25-inch Dob all night. And I thought, well, what has happened with this? And I couldn't find it anywhere. I was a little troubled. So, because I had a lot of drawings of things in it, of galaxies and stuff like that. So all of a sudden, Clyde gets up and Clyde had a voice. He was, in his 80s and a little stooped at that
Yeah.
time. He was short to begin with, but he was even shorter. Oh, I'm sorry, Dave. I was sitting on your book, sitting on the chair. So I sat on this book. We had to have Clyde, sign
That's
it.
funny.
And then David Levy said it was my chair and signed it. And finally I said, it's my book, and I signed it. So you get, these kind of artifacts that you get,
Yes, definitely.
they relate to American history, but also cool stuff with regard to astronomy. And that connects us, I think, the past to the present.
Very good. I met Clyde at the Riverside Telescope Makers Conference a couple of times, and
Yeah.
very personal guy. He and his wife, they were very wonderful people.
Patsy was great as well. And yeah,
Yes.
very generous. And boy, he wrote, I think every kid who wrote him about Pluto, he wrote a letter back to. He was a
Yeah.
great, great guy. So we miss him. Yeah.
So, are there astronomers or discoveries that you wish astronomers or amateurs knew more about or talked more about?
The rate of astronomical discovery is greater now than it ever has been, which is a nice problem. The
Hmm.
AAS meeting, the American Astronomical Society meeting, just happened here, of course, in Phoenix. We saw each other
Hmm.
there. I think one of the most exciting things, there are lots of things going on. There's a lot that we don't know about, of course, about the universe yet. We don't know what dark matter and dark energy are yet. We're coming up almost to the century point since Fritz Zwicky, introduced the idea of dark matter. It was the 1960s when Vera Rubin and her team did all of her work. So we still don't know what, 95% of the universe is made of. That doesn't mean that what we do know well, gravitation and relativity, aren't true. They are, those are repeatedly. But I think one thing among many that's really exciting, the Rubin telescope, the new images that we've seen, only a couple of fields yet. But in Chile, of course, even better than Tucson or Mauna Kea or the Canary Islands, the Atacama Desert in Chile is the best place on Earth for
Hmm.
astronomical observing, and that's why many observatories are being built down there now. The Rubin telescope, which is about to enter normal operations, it's going to photograph these huge fields, and we saw images projected on the planetarium there in Phoenix.
Oh,
You zoom in, 50 times into these images, and they hold together. It is going to
uh,
revolutionize what we know about the deeper universe. That's going to be a big, big deal over the coming years.
Wow. Do you think astronomy is moving too fast to really have time to appreciate what's happening?
Well, that's a good question because I think years ago we probably would have said so. There's so many things that are happening now that we can't really pay attention to. That is, as they like to say, a nice problem to have,
Hmm.
but it is a problem. There are lots of things that would have been a big deal a generation ago that go past in the blink of an eye now, and so that is an issue now.
Hmm.
What to pay attention to, what to feature, there are still big questions to figure out. It was Martin Harwitt years ago. This was 30 years ago. Wrote this book, Cosmic Discovery. He estimated that we really understand maybe I think it was about 16 or 18% of the kinds of phenomena in the cosmos. We have a long way to go
Yeah,
yet, in terms
definitely.
of really understanding everything. But we're on a really rapid journey now,
We
and
are.
it's an exciting time to be interested in this stuff.
Yeah, it was interesting at the AAS meeting. We were talking to all the students that were there. And the gentleman I was with, Ron May, he's our marketing guy for the association. And we made a bet that we should do a drinking game every time one of the students said exoplanet. I think I would have been hammered by
Boy,
10 a.m. I would have been.
you'd have to have a good supply of liquid. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it is. But that showed me where the youth is, what fields they're going into now too.
Right. Oh
So
yeah. Exoplanets red hot, and
yeah,
now we know of I think it's more than 6,000 in the Milky Way,
right.
and planetary systems. And the more we find out about everything as we would expect, whether it be exoplanets or chemistry through spectroscopy, the more things are the same and uniform, and we're not exactly in a very special place, you know. The
True.
universe is extraordinarily large. We don't know because M dwarfs are the faintest stars, are hard to see over long distances, but we have, probably, somewhere between 2 and 400 billion stars in the Milky Way, most numerous ones being the really faint ones. We have at least 100 billion galaxies. And if you start talking to Alex Filipenko and about the polarity of dark matter, the universe could actually be infinite. That sounds like a bad Star Trek episode. It is possible. So the vastness of the universe is really mind-boggling, and we just know the distance scale of even the closest things to us is so huge, even to the nearest star it's as Carl Sagan, our old pal, long lost pal, used to say, the universe could be filled with life,
Right.
as we understand a little bit more about RNA and DNA. We still don't know all about them, but as friends of ours like Richard Dawkins try to figure that out, there could be life scattered all through the universe, and yet it's so distant that we'll never have them land in Central Park and go to dinner with us, so it's quite a story, this universe that we're
It
finding.
really is. Now you've worked with so many incredible people in your career. Who's really left the biggest impression on you, if you could nail it down?
Boy, and that is one thing that working on one of the magazines puts you in contact
Hmm.
with so many people over time as contributors and doing things. I've also gotten really involved as one of the members of the board on the Starmus Festival,
Hmm.
which is a European science festival. There, I think the scariest thing I ever went through was giving my first talk at Starmus for 45 minutes or whatever it was, with Stephen Hawking and his nurses in the front row, and you looked over here, you looked over there. I didn't want to look right at Stephen, the whole time, but he was the nicest, funniest guy in the
Hmm.
world. Carl Sagan was an early inspiration to
Hmm.
encourage me to get into astronomy when
Right.
I first wrote him when I was a teenager. And many, many people, there have been lots of people. I mean, Jane Goodall had just joined our Starmus board a few months before she died this past year. It's you get to meet really some of the brightest people it feels like on the planet. That's been a real privilege to get to know them and know that the people who are really at a high level doing this stuff are the nicest people in the world,
It's very true.
which is really reassuring too.
Yeah, I pinch
And
myself with some of the people I've had on this podcast. Go, did I really just talk to this person? It's just like
yeah, right.
it's a
Well,
lot of
and
fun.
I'm glad you can come down and be on a broadcast with me.
Oh no,
You
no, no!
have to bring it down a few notches
No,
sometimes.
you've been a get out there for me for a while. It's finally, I'm glad this finally happened. No,
But it's amazing some of the folks who are on this planet and love astronomy and cosmology and life on Earth and are thinking about it. Yeah.
no, no. When you're with Astronomy Magazine, were there moments when the news just exploded, like a comet or discovery, where
Yeah.
everything changed overnight?
Yeah, there really were. And some of the big discoveries, dark energy, in 1998 was a huge discovery that seemed to me like it was out of left field, that completely reset things. Some of the launches of things. I mean, we had a story, a cover story on Press that, this is in a horrifying way at the time when I was a young editor, 1986, the year of the shuttle, when Challenger exploded,
And we're on the anniversary of that as we record this.
right. And so, nothing that could be done, and just lots of advances. I was too young. I wasn't at the magazine when this happened, but the acceleration of what really made astronomy the largest title in the world that was being read about on its subject were the Voyager missions. And that was right before I joined the magazine. But
Okay.
so in 78, 79, 80, 81, that whole grand tour of the solar system of really seeing the major planets and their systems in a complex way for the first time ever with the two Voyager craft.
Right.
That was really a revolutionary era there at the end of the 70s and start of the 80s.
Hmm. So did you ever have a story that didn't fit the magazine that you wish it did?
Yeah, but we had such a flood of people wanting to contribute all the time that we really didn't get too far
Okay.
with that. And authors, I think we did a pretty bang up job of editing things and
Hmm.
making astronomy's sort of formula was to make things clear to people who were not PhDs, but yet not oversimplify
Right.
things, to make it understandable but accurate factually. And we, so when authors signed a contract, they said, well, you're going to edit it, any way you like. We had, I think it was just two or three authors who were professional astronomers who went absolutely ballistic because anything on their manuscript was changed at all. And they submitted it, of course, like it was a paper going to the Astrophysical Journal. So there were a couple of challenges, but not many. And we actually had to pull a couple of stories
Oh,
very late because people kind of freaked out a little. That was a very rare event, though. Most people, authors, were very appreciative that you made their stuff really widely appealing to a large
I'm
audience.
sure. I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if someone wants to write for astronomy,
Yeah.
what should they focus on first? The knowledge, the curiosity, storytelling. Where would you like to see them go?
And I think all of the above, but the things that are happening now in the news that are developments in astronomy and astrophysics, in cosmology, in planetary science, all those areas are the four main big areas, have developments that are going on at a pretty steady pace now, pretty fast pace.
Hmm.
So identifying something that is interesting and timely. Why should I be reading this? Not just reading it when the magazine comes to you, but why should I be reading it right now? That's the key to having a story that is very successful. And then, of course, with the hobby stories, wanting to cover whether it be observing or imaging or how to take care of your telescope or which telescope is best for you,
Hmm.
product reviews and so on. There's kind of a repeating theme of hitting those areas frequently enough that the readers are happy that they're getting enough material. You know what I mean? So there's a little bit of black magic that goes into this of sensing what is right at a certain time to present to them, what's most important, and what combination of things in 1 month will be the best package you can deliver to people.
Very good. Very good. So what's exciting to you about the next generation of skywatchers?
Boy, the fact that it's easier now to get involved than it ever has been. You don't have
Mhm.
to be some nut who memorizes patterns of stars with a finder telescope. Now you can punch things in and have your telescope slew and find things pretty easily, even small or large scopes. Imaging is much, much easier now. And lots of young people who get into this now, who I've talked to in Arizona and New
Mhm.
Mexico, elsewhere, really love imaging and taking their own. I don't care that MGC 6946 has been imaged a lot. This is my picture of it, and I really
Right.
take pride in that. There's a lot of power with that. And of course, the Damien Peaches are setting, it used to be Don Parker,
Right.
but Damien Peach sets the high bar for planetary imaging now.
Crisco, yeah, people like that. They
Exactly.
they
Yeah,
are
yeah.
they are yeah,
Yeah,
they're the planetary Tony Hallises.
exactly, at an elite level. And that reminds me, I'll quickly interject another. So I remember a Texas Star Party again. It was when Don Parker was giving the main lecture there, and it was a packed room. There were 800 people or so in that lecture room there. And he sat down, and this was when Don first set up in Coral Gables his remote imaging system. So he could say, well, I've got this all set now. I can be in my house and turn it on, and it's going to image Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn whenever they're up. And I can sit down and do the important things. And he had a picture of him reading the Wall Street Journal. And that we've now come, fully into that automated
Yes.
era
Yes.
of imaging, and so imaging seems to be red hot right now with the automated scopes, if
Hmm.
you will, and with the cameras that are much easier to deal with. But for old timers, like I still love being out, under a real sky, seeing photons as well. And I hope that we'll understand that polluting the whole sky with photons aiming everywhere doesn't do anything but make more money for energy companies, and eventually we'll have a more sensible lighting of the night sky that will let more people be observers in more places.
So when you go out at night and stare up, do you still have the same feeling you had when you started, or is there something more or less?
Mostly I do still, and there's so many, now with and I know, this is kind of a little bit of a high bar for me. Now the Tucson Club has a 40-inch telescope. My friends down in New Mexico have a 30-inch Lockwood scope. These are large telescopes,
Yeah.
but with a telescope of that ambitious size, you can see thousands of objects that are above the horizon at any moment, you know there, and certainly with imaging things, even in non-ideal sites, there are people now imaging the whole Vandenberg catalog of
Mm.
nebulae, going after these globular clusters in the Andromeda galaxy. The ambition of stuff that people are imaging now is way beyond what it was 20 or 30 years ago, so even in not so great skies. So that's really good to see. But I get excited. It was really special that first year that I had as an observer, because I didn't know what to expect at all. All I had at first before the Celestron 8 were my dad's 7 by 50 binoculars out in a dark farm field with my dog, border collie dog, going out with me. What would you be able to see the dumbbell? I had no idea. Those were exciting times because everything was a discovery. But even now that I know pretty much what things look like, it's still electrifying to me to go out in a telescope and say, well, let's look at M79 and see how globular cluster looks tonight, or M81 and M82, the galaxies, how will its arms look in a dark sky, the moon's not up. That's still a very electrifying, special feeling. Or a meteor, fires overhead as we're aiming toward Jupiter in the early evening sky, and seeing where the moons are, and that's still very electrifying to me. And I don't think you lose that feeling, I hope, over time.
No, I hope not. Yeah. Was there a book early on that helped spark that love for astronomy?
There were a lot of books and I was a book guy, and my dad was an academic. So I kind of latched on to all kinds of books as quickly as I could. And back in the day, sadly, this last year we lost him, but Jack Newton back in the day was a pioneering imager,
Hmm.
a great, super nice guy. And now this was before he did the Cambridge Deep Sky album that was a color photo book of all of his great images. He did a black and white book that was called Deep Sky Objects, and that book happened to come out right at about the time that I was really getting into this stuff. And just looking at all these objects at the same plate scale, that he had imaged. I don't remember how many were in the book, but 100 or something like that. That was really inspiring, and it led to getting all these other books. Well, I wonder, what will this galaxy look like when I look at it, in my
Hmm.
telescope. A world of discovery, because of books like that. Those were inspiring right away early on when I was a teenager.
Right. Very good. Well, David, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience today?
A couple things that I'm involved with. If
Yes.
if you if they see it soon, here in February, we're going to hold, and I'm going to host again, the I Heart Pluto Festival in Flagstaff. And that's an annual festival now that Lowell Observatory hosts. We host the main talk about that in the Orpheum Theater.
Okay.
That's where Clyde went and saw Gary Cooper in the Virginian the night that he discovered Pluto, that discovery was confirmed, rather.
Lowell Observatory, what they've done to it in the last few years, my
Yeah.
goodness, it
It,
is amazing. I spent time up there when I was in college at
yeah.
the Clark Refractor, but I
Oh
go up there
boy.
now and it's just like this is like it's like Disneyland for astronomers. It really
It
is. It's
is
pretty wild.
it's really a unique observatory, and there's a huge museum center that has been
Hmm.
built there now, and the so-called Pluto camera is back on Mars Hill. Of course, the Clark refractor is what Lowell himself used for all of his, and the Slifers
Hmm.
with discovering, the distance scale, the recession velocities before Hubble, even, of, what turned out to be spiral galaxies. So
Right.
it's an exciting place. And we're going to have my friends now who are doing stuff in New Mexico, who I'm working with. They work for Off World Productions. If you find Off World Productions on Facebook, you can join their brand new Facebook page there. They've got two of Clyde's mirrors, which they've rebuilt into telescopes. So a 16 and an 18-inch of Clyde's mirrors, Clyde's own personal telescopes.
Hmm.
So they're going to have one of those two telescopes up there for people to look through
Oh
at
my goodness.
Jupiter before they go into the theater where Clyde saw the
Wow.
Virginian. So you'd be able to look through Clyde's mirror at Jupiter,
And
Pluto's.
when is that going to be?
So that's going to be Saturday, February 14th
Okay.
is the event at the Orpheum Theater. But you can go to iheartpluto.org and see the whole schedule. There are several days of events,
Okay.
but the main event is going to be talks by Alan Stern, a pal who's a planetary scientist, and also Andy Chaikin, who's written a
Oh.
lot about the space
Oh
program,
yeah, yeah.
and some other scientists as well, Chad Trujillo from Caltech and others joining us there for the main session on the 14th. But it's several days of
Okay.
activity.
I'll put the
And
link for that in the show notes so everyone can find that.
excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. And then it's also interesting and will be important because all sorts of activities are going to be happening this year with this group, Off World Productions. that has Clyde's
Okay.
telescopes, and they're going to be doing all sorts of exciting things that I'll talk more about in the future down in New Mexico as well.
Great. Well, David, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Tim, for having me, and I look forward to seeing you in the future here, I hope soon.
Definitely. Okay. Thank you. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Observer's Notebook podcast. A big thank you to David Eicher for coming on the podcast and sharing his insights to amateur astronomy. I hope you all enjoyed it. I know I did. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe and share this podcast. It really helps reach more listeners. New episodes of the Observer's Notebook appear on the 1st and 15th of every month. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, and the ALPO YouTube channel. If you'd like to help support the podcast, you can do so through Patreon. For as few dollars as $1 a month to up to $35, where you receive exclusive benefits, including a 1-year membership to the ALPO, and producer credits on the podcast. You'll find the link in the Patreon page and the website in our show notes down below. A special thank you, as always, to our producers, Steve Siedentop and Michael Moyer, for their generous support of the Observer's Notebook podcast. If you'd like to get a hold of me, you can email me anytime at tim.robertson@alpo-astronomy.org. Thank you for tuning in. You can join the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers today. It's just this easy. You can become a valuable member of this International Lunar and Planetary Astronomy Organization, founded in 1947 by Walter H. Haas. It's based upon the structure of the British Astronomical Association. You can join various lunar and planetary observing sections, contribute to our massive archive of observations. You'll have access to our extensive lunar and planetary gallery of over 20,000 photos and observations of the sun, the moon, comets, meteors, and the planets. You'll receive our quarterly publication, the Journal of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. You have the ability to join the ALPO training program, which will teach you the finer points of making planetary observations. You can attend our annual virtual conference, and you'll have access to the Observer's Notebook podcast. Membership begins at only $22 a year. The way to find us, just go to your Google and type in ALPO Astronomy, and you'll see this prompt come up. There's our association with our website, alpo-astronomy.org, and you'll come to our homepage. If you look at the top of the homepage, it says Join ALPO. Click on that, and you'll come to the sign-up screen. It gives you the information on the organization, and there's 2 ways to join. You can join by mail, where you will download a membership form, or you can pay online using PayPal. This is the PayPal processing page. You just fill out a few information lines, and then you're given the chance to click PayPal and join the association. Welcome to the ALPO.